Los Angeles, he's not one of those FCS guys.
No.
Los Angeles Rams, number 9 on the composite, B+ per PFF. It all started with their first-round pick since 2016, their first selection. Pick 19 overall. They go Jared Verse out of Florida State. They double up with Florida State defensive lineman with Braden Fisk, the defensive tackle at pick 39. Gave up a significant amount of draft capital. Next year's second rounder to move up 8 or 9 spots in the second round to get Fisk. They go Blake Corum, the running back out of Michigan, in round 3. And their third rounder is Cam Kinchens out of Miami, the safety. And then they go more defensive line. They drafted a 4-man defensive line. Brennan Jackson, the edge out of Washington State, and then defensive tackle Tyler Davis out of Clemson. Another one that just stands out to me, Bo Limmer, I think has a chance to be, as a center, a contributor down the line here for the Rams as well. And kicker Joshua Carty out of Stanford's in there.
Nice. In
the 6th round. What are your thoughts on the Rams draft?
Interesting draft. I like Jared Verse in the first round. I think that's really good. It's a good player, good position, good value, good across the board. Verse, I think, was probably slept on a little bit in this draft. All that we talked about this before. Like, he felt like the guy whose name was just slipping through the cracks of the Latu versus Dallas Turner debate. You know, the sort of the athlete versus the football player in really reductive terms. And then Jared Verse was almost like the best of both worlds, right? Wasn't quite as productive as Latu, wasn't quite as good an athlete as Dallas Turner, but was a fairly reasonable compromise of both. And you could easily see why A, team would have him number 1 of all those 3, and B, why he should be ranked along with those other guys. So ends up going in that kind of range. And I think, yeah, really good addition to this Rams defensive line. Then we get the Braden Fisk thing. So we get the Braden Fisk conversation, what is he as a player? And then we get the process conversation of the trade. I had said for a while, last couple of drafts, it really feels like teams have gotten better at avoiding the sort of classic pitfalls of drafting and the rules of thumb and the things that you don't do. Bill Barnwell at ESPN has a piece today, I think, about trading up in the draft and, you know, the sort of general rules of when you do and don't do it, and generally you don't do it. But this felt like the one move in this entire draft, really. I mean, we've talked about the Michael Penix thing and the reasons behind that. But this was the one classic, like, old school folly pick where they evidently just got fixated on Braden Fisk and could not come out of this draft without him. They had apparently been trying to trade up for him for the majority of the second round before they finally found somebody that was willing to do it, and giving up what they gave up for him, a future second round pick. I mean, that's so much of an overpay that on the live show, we all thought it was a typo. We all thought it was a mistake. There's no way they gave that up to move up. How many spots did they move up? Not many.
13.
For Braden Fisk. They gave up a future second round pick to move up 13 spots in the second round this year.
So ESPN, we have to talk about this stuff because it's not just about the players and where they picked. It is how they got there. ESPN Seth Walder said this was the most expensive trade up in ESPN's 6 years of essentially putting draft valuation, pick valuations out there.
Right.
I think we had Carolina winning this 2/3 of the time, winning this, and that felt even...
Which is a big number.
It's a huge number, and that also kind of feels light. The perspective I always try to use is the same one that I used in the Texans draft. Forget what you even think about Braden Fisk. Let's say he's even a first-round caliber player. Let's say he becomes Kobe Turner. Kobe Turner, 83.2 grade last year, and one of the top 10 most valuable defensive tackle in the NFL last year. Kobe Turner, their third-round pick from last year. Let's say they nailed the evaluation one more time, and they get that. They want Braden, the guy that they could have had at 52, plus whatever they could get next year in the second round from Carolina. So just putting perspective here, the pick at 52, would they trade up from 51 or 52? Either way. A.D. Mitchell was the pick at 52.
Right.
So we're basically saying Braden Fisk, if we're just trying to evaluate this trade, Braden Fisk has to add more value than what they could have gotten at 52. Let's say A.D. Mitchell, wide receiver, went to the Colts. Ben Sinnott, the tight end, to the Commanders. Michael Hall, same position, defensive tackle, who goes to the Browns. Plus next year's second rounder.
Right.
Which, let's just say it's the middle of the second round. You're talking about another guy that's competing. Could be another Roger Rosengarten, starting caliber tackle. I mean, we've got. He's got to be more valuable than 2 players, one of whom would have been picked just 13 picks later.
So we've covered this a bit already this cycle with Detroit trading up in the first round for Terrion Arnold, for Minnesota trading up in the first round for Dallas Turner, and then, last year with Will Anderson pick from the Texans. And I think we've been kinder or softer, or however you want to term it, on those two trades this year, the first rounders, than we would generally have been. And part of that reasoning is this idea of, if you are trading up high enough that you are stopping the slide of somebody that felt like a genuine blue chip prospect, it's potentially slightly different rules, or at least it's fuzzy enough in the data because of the sample size and because of the players we're talking about that you can at least construct an argument that way, right? When you get beyond that level, and nobody is arguing that this is a genuine blue chip player. Like, nobody's saying this is the best defensive tackle in the draft they stopped the slide of here. Even them, I don't think, are arguing that, right? So that's not on the table here. We've just identified Braden Fisk as a guy they really love and somebody they really wanted. In Barnwell's article, he has a line that says essentially, so the reason you don't do that typically is because everybody's bad at drafting and the chances that you've identified the right player is minimal, right? So he says between 2011 and 2019, a team trading up in the draft landed the best player in that trade just 42% of the time, right? The team that traded down ended up getting the best player of all the players that, all the picks that were made in that trade 47% of the time, with the rest essentially there's no obvious best player. Right. So you might think that like Braden Fisk's our guy. We've identified him. We love him. Braden Fisk is amazing. We have to have him, even if it costs us next year's second round pick. The analytics, the big bad bogeyman of the analytics would say, don't do it, because there is a better chance that you're wrong than there is that you're right? And therefore, trading up, giving away a higher or a valuable pick next year to make that decision, you're paying an extra pick to be wrong more often than you're right, is effectively the analysis, right? So don't do it.
There was also a fifth rounder in there that the Rams gave up. So it's just,
right.
It was a massive payment for Braden Fisk. The one other thing I want to bring to the table here, I like Braden Fisk as a player. I'm actually surprised he went this high just because of the short arms. He is a pure gap shooting, hard-nosed, whatever, generic player you want to say, but the dude brings energy to the table, and he has been very productive. But he was mostly productive at Western Michigan. Last year, he took a step back production-wise at Florida State, had a 73 grade. If you want to compare this to Kobe Turner, for me, was a blue model guy. I thought he was a steal of the draft. I feel pretty good about that assessment after last year. Kobe Turner, last year's third rounder by the Rams, had a higher grade in the NFL, PFF grade, higher grade in the NFL than Braden Fisk had in the ACC at Florida State. So I think there's also some evaluation risk in here as well, taking Fisk at pick 39. High level, though, I love the theme of the Rams draft, which was, whether it's driven by Aaron Donald retiring or not, but they're saying, we're going to reshape this defensive line. A power edge in Jared Verse, a power edge in Brennan Jackson out of Washington State, who I think is going to be in the league a long time as a rotational player, a hard edge setter who could play the run extremely well. Defensive tackle Tyler Davis out of Clemson, who I think has potential. They added 4 defensive linemen to the mix here and said, we're going to reshape that entire room. And I think overall, they are going to be better when it comes to the defensive line for the Rams.
Absolutely. Again, adding players in bulk, always a good thing. I like their third rounders as well. Blake Corum, I still think, was my top running back in this draft. I think everyone is focusing too much on last year, post-injury Blake Corum, and I don't think it's a permanent problem, right? We started to see, by the college football playoffs, Blake Corum was starting to look more like the 2022 version of Blake Corum than he did earlier in the season. And I think people are underselling how stupidly good Blake Corum was in 2022. He had a PFF rushing grade of 96 in 2022. That was better, or basically the same level as Bijan Robinson, who was like the greatest running back we'd seen come into the league in a decade, right? Now, he's not the physical specimen that Bijan Robinson is. He's not as capable in terms of the pass game. But yeah, Bijan, 96.1 that year. Corum, 96.2. So he was comparable, and the stats are very similar as well. 6.1 yards per attempt overall for Robinson, 5.9 for Corum. Bijan, 4.2 yards after contact. Corum, 3.4. So that was a big gap, but 73 broken tackles. The stats were very similar. The production was very similar. And he only fumbled one time in that entire time. So if you get that guy back on the field, if he's an extra year removed from that injury, which was a meniscus tear, it's not like, he didn't have he didn't have a Nick Chubb injury, right? Where his entire knee got shredded and you're like, oh, he's never going to be the same guy again. Blake Corum, if he gets back to that, is a phenomenal running back. I watched their press conference where they were sort of basically saying, he reminded them a lot of Kyren Williams. And now they've basically added a second Kyren Williams to the backfield.
And their offense was so good with Kyren Williams last year. What a find he was for them.
And I do think they've now got they added Boston Scott as well. So they have an entire backfield of people that you don't acknowledge as humans because they're all short.
I always go to bat for the short guys.
When you can remember who they are.
I couldn't remember Deuce Vaughn's name for a second. But that's an age. I have four. I was told it's more kid driven. Too many kids. Too much in the brain. Taking care of the kids. Not that I'm getting old.
I think you're anti-short people.
I'm never.
You see them all as the same. They're not worthy of your attention.
You were complimenting me recently about how much I go to bat for the shorts.
The shorts. Anyway, Kyren Williams last year was actually one of the few running backs that was really a kind of a bell cow running back in a league that's gone away from those guys. Most teams operate from some kind of division of resources and backfield by committee. Kyren Williams really was a bell cow type of back for the Rams, and he was really good doing that. But given his size, given his stature, I kind of feel like they'd like to divide the resources a little bit more. And if they found a genuine Kyren Williams clone in Sean McVay's eyes, I think Blake Corum can be a reasonable part of that backfield. And then Cameron Kitchens in the third round I quite liked as well. Now, coming off a bad year. The year before, though, he was really much better. And there's a lot of boom or bust to Cameron Kitchens' play. He gets himself in some ugly positions. But he's got, legit size, ability, range. He can make a lot of really good plays. It's just that all of his mistakes in 2023 were, touchdown costing
disastrous,
mistakes.
Man. Yeah, he was at when Georgia Tech made the improbable comeback early in the season. He was kind of at the forefront of the game-winning touchdown. I think Kitchens gets in trouble with his eyes a little bit sometimes.
Yeah,
but he also made big plays in 22 with his eyes.
Some absolutely terrible tackling, just absolute farcical jokes of breaking down or just doing nothing last year. I think last year was the low ebb of what you're ever going to get from Cameron Kitchens. I think that's the worst season he could put together, and every time he screwed up, it was the worst possible screw up you can make in that play. But we saw just the year before, he's capable of so much better than that. And we know how volatile that position is. I feel for safety sometimes because it's the one position where if you make a mistake slightly, it can be immediately a touchdown in a way it isn't for a lot of other positions. Even corner. Generally speaking, there's a safety to fix it at the back end. You can screw up as a corner, and a lot of the times there's a safety there to bail you out. If you're the safety and you screw up, there's no one else behind you to solve that. It's a touchdown.
That's why I think sometimes we undervalue safe safeties.
Safe safeties.
Safe safeties. Play the name of the position sometimes. Don't need the flashy stuff. Just be in position. Any UDFA standouts here for the Rams?
Just looking now. Nobody that leaps out, I don't believe.